I've been throwing swim baits for over 12 years now, and when I first started, like most people, I would pick up a budget-friendly swim bait or a beginner-style swim bait, and at the time, it was all exciting, it was all new, so any swim bait I got, I really enjoyed it, and that's just what I was able to fish with. Obviously, fast forward to nowadays, I fish kind of the high-end spectrum swim baits, the high cost, the very low number made swim baits that I just find to be better suited for my style of fishing and what I aim for in a swim bait, I guess, nowadays. However, in this video series, we're gonna go back in time to that old school Jeff, and we're gonna be trying out some of those beginner budget friendly swim baits to see if they still hold up in today's time or if some of them should be kind of left in the past. And today we're gonna be first starting off with a classic, and that is the Jackall Gantarel, a bluegill style swim bait made by Jackall Japan. This bait has been around since 2015. A lot of guys, this is one of their first swim baits that they pick up. This bait is kind of more on the higher end budget friendly swim baits, where the features on it are high end, the price is a little bit on the higher end as well, but I think the bait overall is an absolute classic. So if you guys are ready, let's get right to today's video. I haven't fished a Gantarel ever since they came out way back in like 2015, and at the time, I was starting to kind of move away from those beginner style swim baits. I was looking at like depths 250s, Hinkles, and stuff like that. And so I didn't really jive well with this bait. It just wasn't really in my forte. It wasn't really what I was looking for in a swim bait at the time. However, I do think that this is a really rad bait. Actually, if we fast forward just today, I went out fishing and I kind of fished around with it first to see how it does.
All right, nice start to the morning. Little guy on that Jackall Gantarel. That was just on a nice straight retrieve right there. Nothing crazy. Small little fish hit that big of a bait. So as a beginner, that's a good sign that even though you might be upgrading to a bait of that caliber and size, doesn't mean you're going to obviously start catching giant fish and no fish. I mean, that's maybe a pound fish and that fish is out of here. Cool. Awesome to see. So it seems like with the Gantarel, the design of the bait was to be more of just a nice, easy swimming action where you don't do a lot with it, which is pretty user-friendly. I mean, just being able to just kind of just straight retrieve it, and it's got a tight S swimming action to it that gives you some fairly realistic swimming. Now later on, it'd be cool to see if I can get it to kind of maybe glide side to side a little bit. It's kind of hard to get these, multi-piece baits to kind of glide side to side. It's just not their purpose. So it seems like, this might be a one style swim bait where you kind of just reel it in, maybe give it a couple pauses in there, real pause, and it might shoot out to the side. You might eat it on just a straight retrieve, but we're going to play around with it, see what else we can do with it. So out of the box, this bait is a floater. It's a fairly slow float out of the box, which for me, I always like having these floating style swim baits just because you could do so much with them. So if you feel like you want to get it down a little bit more, or if you want to keep it up on the surface, it being a floater kind of allows you to play around with it with certain weights, which we might put some weight on it here in a little bit. But nowadays, for anybody fishing, whether you're a beginner or you're an expert, I highly recommend people getting floating style baits. I find that it's obviously a lot easier to make a floating swim bait into a slow sink than it is to turn a slow sink into a slower sink. perhaps. So the only way that you could do stuff like that is drilling out weight, which is a whole thing that a lot of people are not going to want to do on a bait that they just bought, especially as a beginner. They don't want to kind of tinker with stuff that much, to where, you know, if I find a bait that it sinks a little too fast and it's a hard bait, I kind of have to go in and drill out weight. So kind of a pain, but it is what it is. That's just a lot of baits out there on the market. So if you could find those floating baits, you can easily turn them into slow sinks or faster sinks just by adding weights to them. So it seems like if you make a long cast and you kind of just keep your rod tip kind of level like this, and you keep that straight retrieve, it seems like those side fins really actually help this bait get down quite a few feet. Actually, I've been kind of hitting bottom, and I was not expecting it. I thought it'd be kind of more of like a true level swim, but those pectoral fins on the side kind of help keep the water pushing over basically the side and the head of the bait, so it keeps like a nose down posture when you're swimming it, which then allows it to get down a deeper depth, but not anything too crazy. Like if I held my rod tip high out on some of those casts, then it'd stay a lot more higher up in the water column. But I kind of want to fish it down a little bit deeper, so it's nice to know that just on a nice straight retrieve with no weight added, it'll get down a few feet just on a straight retrieve. All right, so we came to a different pond now that has a lot more grass, so we're gonna see how this bait does fishing around grass. In theory, since it's a bluegill bait, you would expect this bait to really shine in a pond like this. Hopefully we could fish the bait above the grass, obviously. Try and catch a bass. Please don't. Get lucky. Get lucky. Oh my God, dude, Jesus Christ. Holy smokes. Oh, he missed the smokes out of that. Oh my goodness.
So we were able to catch one fish on this, had that other eat right next to my feet. But this was a fun bait to try and figure out again after all these years. There's certain nuances with this bait, but before we get into those, let's just talk about the bait itself. There's a lot of cool features that come on this bait. One thing we're gonna look up here at the line tie is that there is a swiveling like eye ring up here. So you don't get a whole lot of line twist when you're casting this bait. When it comes down to hard baits, a lot of this helicoptering will happen. And so I actually really like this feature on the bait. You get less of that line twist and it really just helps. Then you have down here on the bottom, you've got a little eyelet there. What guys use that for in Japan and other places is you basically can put like a grenade weight here. If you wanted to fish this more in deeper water or on the bottom and kind of like bottom bounce it, you've got these side fins here that protrude from the bait. This helps with kind of keeping the water pushing the head down so it doesn't rise up even on like a fast retrieve. So out on a long cast, the bait will kind of get down and it'll stay down with those fins. So you can get it down a few feet just because of those fins. What's nice also is that they have double split rings to swiveling hook hangers, which I don't really necessarily think that you need double split rings if you have the swiveling hook hangers as well. I just feel like whenever I used double split rings back in the day, it was on a bait that didn't have the swiveling hook hangers. And so you kind of just get a little extra twist in the hook when those fish are thrashing with the double split rings. But it comes with double split rings. It does come with a feathered treble. I kind of just went through a lot of grass today, and while ripping it off, the feather kind of came undone on the hook. But this is what the hook will look like feathered. So it's a nice feather. It's not over the top, but it acts as just kind of like a target area for fish to hit it, and it kind of slows the bait down on a glide as well. The hooks that come with it are pretty sticky sharp as well. They're fairly strong. And then moving back to the back end here on the tail, you have another eyelet, which Some guys will add another treble hook there, or you could do basically whatever you want with the bait. Now, the bait is 6.3 inches and it weighs 2.45 ounces. So it's on the lighter end of the swim baits, but it still gives you a good profile and size. So, I mean, this is a bait where kind of what I talked about before is you would want to fish this like in springtime when those bluegill are moving up right after the bass are done spawning. Those bluegill are spawn. And this is kind of like your average size bluegill that you're going to have in most bodies of water, whether it's a lake or a pond. So it's a perfect snack size. Obviously, the fish that I caught today was not big on it, and it still absolutely smoked it. So you can catch small fish on it. You can catch big fish on it. You can fish it in those areas around the bluegill beds. Obviously, it's summertime now, so those fish are feeding on the bluegill that are kind of in that grass area. They're also feeding on some of that bluegill fry as well. So anything bluegill is just an absolute perfect profile for this time of year. And then once you start getting into that fall transition, a lot of those bluegill will kind of push off and go into slightly bit deeper water. So that's when you can put like a chin weight down here and fish it in some of that deeper rock or in some of that deeper grass during the fall. So overall, it's a great bait for those bodies of water where a main forage food for them is bluegill. I mean, the profile is absolutely money. It could be for fish that are eating crappie as well, or something with a slightly bit taller profile. This bait will absolutely imitate super, super well. Now, what's really cool is the paint schemes that come with these baits. This is just one of their translucent bluegill colors. It looks absolutely killer. Like, this color is super, super badass. They make a wide variety of different colors as well, and they absolutely nail them. It's a really, really cool bait. Now, if you're thinking that it's just still slightly too big, well, don't worry. Jackall also made a Gantarel Jr. This little guy is 5 inches long and it weighs 1.5 ounces. So it's a little bit smaller, weighs a little bit less, and it's basically the same exact swim bait. It's the same exact swim bait, just in a smaller downsized profile. It's got the same feathered treble hooks, the double split rings. Everything is basically the exact same on it, just in a little bit smaller profile. So, you know, if you're fishing for those fish and your bluegill just aren't necessarily this size, then you could totally downsize to something just a little bit smaller and you can get more bites. Maybe this would be a perfect one for, you know, smallmouth in a river system where the bluegill probably aren't that big and you're fishing for smallmouth. Like, this would be an absolute killer for those smallmouth. Again, same kind of colors in this one as well. So you have options when it comes down to the Gantarel. Now, the swim of the Gantarel is kind of what probably a lot of guys are looking for and asking about. Obviously, it's a multi-piece bait here. You've got a joint here in the middle, then you've got another one back here in the tail section. On a slow retrieve, this bait's gonna have a slightly bit wider S motion, and then once you pick up the pace, it kind of tightens itself up. You can kind of burn it. You don't want to go too fast with it, but you can get it to do a slow, medium, and a fairly slow, fast retrieve, and the bait won't blow out. This thing on that straight retrieve, when you're reeling it, it'll reel straight, and then if you give it a stop, it'll shoot out to one of the sides, and then you can go right back into that straight retrieve. Pause it, it's going to shoot out to one of those sides. So a stop and go retrieve would be really, really money for this bait, or just a plain regular straight retrieve. Now, can you get this bait to glide? Yes, you can. However, the inputs is a little bit finicky just because you have that extra little joint back here kind of messing it up. So when I was able to get it to glide, the motion is very light with the reel and the rod to kind of guide it and get it going. And once I got it going, it looked pretty good, but it was hard for me to consistently get it, especially if I started throwing pauses in there, or it'd be out of like a straight retrieve and to try and twitch it right. I wouldn't necessarily be able to get it right every single time. But maybe with a little bit of practice, you guys would be able to kind of get the retrieve down, the glide down, if you wanted it to be a glide. Now, a thing that I might have to try sometime in the future is actually just locking this back joint up. And I feel like if you were able to lock this joint back here, you could actually get it to glide like a normal S-style glide bait. But you would just have to figure out how you would kind of lock up this joint. You could probably put like some spacers or something in between that. And I bet you could get this bait to actually kind of glide more consistently if you did that. So just a little tip there. What's nice about some of these baits that we're going to be talking about in this beginner or budget friendly series is the rod and reel that you're going to use for these baits. Now these baits, like the full-size Gantarel, only being 2.45 ounces, basically if you have like a heavy conventional rod that you would use for, I don't know, maybe slightly bit bigger crankbait, or I wouldn't really recommend a flipping stick because it's so stiff and you might dump a lot of fish, but obviously something like that could work. Maybe like a jig and worm rod that's like on the heavier side. Something like that I feel like you can get away with. Reels, you can keep it in that 150 size, 200 size, line 14, 16 pound. So like the rod that I was using is basically kind of like a medium heavy swimbait rod, something that's rated up to 3 ounces. This just happens to be a Megabass Destroyer rod. Definitely not a budget or beginner swimbait rod, but there's tons of them out there on the market that are rated 1 to 3 ounces, that when you're a beginner and you're just now getting into swimbait fishing, you don't have to spend $300, $400, $500 to get into this. If you just spend, $150, you can have a pretty solid beginner swimbait rod that can cover a lot of swimbaits that are in this category, that are in that 1 to 3 ounces. The reel that I have, again, just a small little 150 size. This is a Bantam, which I absolutely love. I like the higher gear ratio, obviously, when you're fishing like some of these hard baits, but you can also go down to like a 6 or a 7. It's not a big deal. Now the line, I was just using 16 pound fluorocarbon. You could obviously just use like 14 pound mono or 16 pound mono, or if you're gonna go braid, I'd go braid to like a short 16 pound leader. You don't want to go too big and up in size and line, because then that's going to start affecting some of these swim baits in their swim. So keep that in mind. Keep the line a little bit lighter. I know you might be afraid to like snap it off, but tie a good knot, check your line all the time, retie, and you won't have a problem losing some of these swim baits. That is the Jackall Gantarel. A rating out of 10, I would probably give this bait like a 7.5 to maybe an 8. It's actually not that bad. It's a little bit more on the expensive side. So like the full-size Gantarel is $59.99. So again, it's on that higher end budget beginner swim bait. But the little junior is only $39.99 if I'm not mistaken. So it's a little more reasonable. But the features on the bait, the color schemes, the durability of it, it's a fantastic swim bait. So if you guys are looking for a beginner good swim bait that's fairly easy to use overall, if you're just planning on kind of just casting and retrieving, you can't go wrong with the Jackall Gantarel. It's been around for a while. A lot of guys have caught a lot of fish on this bait, and you just can't go wrong with it. If you guys made it this far into the video, I'm actually going to be giving away these baits. I already have too many swim baits, and I don't really see myself fishing these here in the near future. So I'd rather give them back to somebody out there that is a beginner swim bait that is looking to get something cool. So comment down below saying, I don't know, wow, Jeff, cool video, and I will pick a random winner, and I will announce that in the next video that I do in this series, which might be in a week, might be in 10 days. I'm not quite sure. I'm actually about to go to Florida to ICAST, so I'm going to be a little bit busy. But just comment down below. I'll pick a random winner, and please reach out to me. I will not be reaching out to you. Just send me a DM on Instagram, and I will pick a winner, and you will get both of these cool swim baits. So other than that, thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, go out there and chase your dreams.